Hello everyone, this is Sithole, licensed professional counselor and founder of owner of Inside Fitness 360 Counseling and Life Coaching out here in Frisco, Texas. I hope everybody has been doing good and that this weekend has found them good. I'm in Texas, we're getting ready for winter. It feels good outside, the sun is shining, and I thought, you know what? Why not I take this opportunity just to step outside and talk about a topic that I've seen that's been coming, up a lot. And what I'm referring to is grief. As we all know, grief is one of those things that we don't talk about until it happens to us. It's one of those topics we never even think deep about or look into to try to figure out what happens when I lose a loved one. What do I do with all this pain? Does it hurt? I remember it was a nightmare for me growing up, just fearing losing a family member because I grew up in a very close-knit family. And love was at the theme, and I could not even imagine the thought of one of us not being there. I grew up around a lot of death, I've lost a lot of uncles, I've lost a lot of aunts, I've lost cousins, I've lost, all my grandparents are gone, and friends, even people that I've gone to school with. I am at that age where I'm starting to notice, most of my schoolmates, my friends have died. Natural causes, sometimes tragic events happened, but regardless, it all ends up in death. So I've been dealing with a lot of that. And it's been one of those things that have been really challenging for me and the people around me. And my peers are starting to experience another whole level of death where they're starting to lose children. And I've been in the middle of it. It's never one of those things you're prepared for, but it's inevitable. It's not an if, it's just when. When it happens, what do you do? I'm a therapist, so I live in the basement of people's lives. I get to hear everything. I get to be there when people are at their darkest moments. And I get to walk with them. And I get to move them along. And I get to see them process their feelings. And I get to understand how they're experiencing. But this is something that you cannot be taught. Because I remember in 2013, I think it was August 15th in 2013, I just come from work and I just came early that day. It was a good day. I got home by 5:30 and I was still working in corporate America at that time. So by 5:30 I was at home, sat on the couch, and I was just breathing, just getting ready to unwind and watch TV and kick in. It was a Thursday. Then I got a phone call from my brother all the way from Zimbabwe. So those of you who are overseas and know that that's an 8-hour time difference. So it was 5 p.m. here and it was 1 a.m. in Zimbabwe. And they said, hey, we had to rush Dad to the hospital. Dad had a heart attack. And I'm like, what? See, I couldn't even believe that. Because my dad, if you knew my dad, he was one of those people who ate well, exercised, slept on time, didn't drink, didn't smoke. My dad did not eat anything that did not have any nutritional value. So if there was a healthy man, this was him. And so a heart attack, that was gonna be the least thing that I would have expected. So during that time, they went to the hospital. That was the Thursday. I got on the phone. I talked to him a little bit, and he was a little bit, cognitive. It was a mild heart attack, and I was like, oh, we're gonna beat this. This is Dad, come on. Because my dad was a man who was about his business. Dr. Sithole was a man of honor, principle, integrity, character, a survivor, a fighter, a man who could beat anything. So here we are, Thursday, is in the hospital. We make arrangements to take him to another facility where they specialize, in heart disorders or cardiac arrest and things like that. And to make things better, it was his old friend who owned, a doctor who owned this facility, and we were like, okay, we're in good shape. Nothing is gonna happen here. So then they go to the hospital and, overnight, I assured him, Dad, you're gonna be all right. I got this. We gonna do whatever it takes, That Friday night, he had a massive heart attack and he slipped into a coma. And that was Friday, Saturday. Sunday, August 18th, I was sitting in church and, got a text message from my brother. Say, man, Dad didn't make it. I was like, what do you mean Dad didn't make it? Ask Dad to go check him out, go check out this situation. So I had to get up out of service, I had to go outside, and he called me from my dad's phone. And I was like, oh, there we go. But then he says, no, man, I had to call you. This was the closest phone to me, but I had to talk to Dad. Dad passed away. We need to start talking about burial and all that stuff. August 18, 2013, I got inducted into a group. I got into a group of grievers. I started to understand what death means whenever it comes in your backyard. I started to understand. I joined a group that many of us don't want to be a part of. A group that even those who are in would not wish it on anybody. So for everybody who's lost a loved one, anybody who's actually struggled with managing the feelings of grief and loss, this here is classes for you. These are things that I've learned in my own personal experience. These are things that I've learned working with different clients on different levels. I'm going to be sharing my experiences, the things that I've learned, the tools that can help you, and even how to think, how to look at grief and how to experience it, and to really delve into this topic because nobody talks about it. It makes people uncomfortable, but it's the essence of life. And when I say it's the essence of life, because everything it goes through a cycle of death and rebirth. That's just life. We see demonstrated in us all the time. We see plants, seasons are changing here in the United States. We're going into winter. Plants are starting to shed their leaves and get ready for winter so they could preserve their nutrients. But come spring, the leaves are going to be rebirthed again. And then we also look at even things like human beings. We're constantly aging every single day, every moment. These grays here that I'm showing on my beard, although they may look fine, but you know what they really are? They are a sign that I'm getting closer to death every single day. So it's a part of life. It's a part of life. So we're just gonna start looking and thinking about what is grief, what is it? Because grief comes in all different shapes and forms and sizes. Because I had to start thinking. Because grief is associated with loss. It's any time that we lose something, or when change comes, or when a sense of normal stops to or ceases to exist. The human goes into a process of grief. So that's grieving. So anytime something changes or we're forced to adjust to a new normal that we did not ask for, you start a process of grief. 2020, the whole world has been grieving the old sense of normal that we've had to deal with. As we started the pandemic of the coronavirus and having to deal with social distancing, homes, people getting relegated to their homes and getting stuck and not having to go to work, no social interactions, everything closing down. We started a process of grief because we started grieving the normal as we knew it, and we were starting to adjust to a new process. And as we experienced this year, grief comes with a whole lot of different emotions and values and thought processes and everything. So in case you were wondering what's happening to you this year and why you've had a lot of emotions, a roller coaster ride, it's because you're grieving. But anyway, let me not get ahead of myself. Now, the dictionary definition of grief, it says it's a deep and poignant, sorrowful distress caused by a loss, maybe particularly to the loss of someone, or a bond that was affection that was formed with, or the end of a familial, social, physical, or emotional pattern that takes you into grief. So whenever something ends. So as I walked into this phase, I started to wonder to myself, why do we grieve? Why do human beings grieve? Why do we enter this process? Because it's a natural process of life, because it's the end of the familiar, right? We all say we like change, but we are creatures of habit. So there are three things that I've learned that are associated with grief that have been synonymous. In my case, as I've watched myself grieve, my siblings grieve, my mother grieve, and even my parents grieve their parents, and even my clients grieve. I've watched, them go through these three things because we grieve the end of the normal, as I had just mentioned. What was, it's ended. It ceased to be. That will never be. That's what death comes, And also we're coming to terms with a new normal. So what's happening is I'm shedding myself, the old version of me, and adjusting to life, with Honor without his dad. What does life look like? See, my dad was one of those guys you would get on the phone at any time, 24/7, and he would help you. He was a wise guy, loving, caring, sensitive. But that was my normal. Whenever there was a problem, call Dad. He knew what to say. But that ended. And the thing about death, what really sucks about death is that I found it to be rude. It walks into the backyard and takes what it wants. And it doesn't ask for your opinion, and it doesn't ask for your consent. So the timing is irrelevant. Death just comes and does what it's doing, and it says, deal with it. This is what's happening. So that's some of it, why the pain, the emotional pain, and the loss of, what was, and now I'm adjusting, to what is a life without you. And also, the third thing that we grieve is we're grieving the fact that we will never, ever experience certain things with those people. Like if a new child comes after a parent has died, they'll never get to meet their grandparent. Or if it's a sibling, their aunt. Or let's just talk about children who are born and the mother dies, and they never get to see their dad, or their dad dies whilst the child is still in the womb. So those are things that will never be. These are the things that we grieve. We grieve the end of what was. We grieve because we're adjusting to what is, and we grieve what will never be. So that's what the human being is grieving. Now, we grieve various things, in our lives. As I say, grief is a human process. It's a human thing, because when you look at a human, we function like a system. A system, I'll use, a car is a most common system or machine that we use, because it's a system that functions a certain way. If one part of it stops functioning, it changes everything, and some of the parts have to adjust and to take in a lot of pressure. So does the human being, it's a system. Let's even look at simple things like oxygen comes in our nose, we process it in our lungs, and we release carbon dioxide. That's a system. So grief is part of the human system of processing emotions. So common things that we grieve, for example, loss of a loved one due to death. Divorce is a huge one. I deal with a lot of people because divorce and death actually mimic, a lot of griefs. They go hand in hand, the way we process them emotionally. Now, because we remember the three things to check if you're grieving, I'm letting go of what was, and I'm walking into a new normal, adjusting to what is, and then I am grieving what will never be. That's the future stuff we'll never get to be. So divorce, when a marriage ends, people grieve those three things. We'll never retire together sipping, iced tea on the porch and say we made it, see each other go into old age, all the hopes and dreams, the things we believed, because nobody gets married to be divorced. So that ripping apart and separation of people grieve that process. And let's talk about moving. When you move and leave your home environment to go somewhere, opportunities might be better, things might be great there. But the thing though, the truth is, there's gonna be a process of change and adjusting to the new normal. You grieve your life as you knew it. And remember, we are different people based on the environment that we live in. So sometimes I'm grieving who I am as a person, so that's all grief there. And sometimes changing employment, getting let go of a job that you wanted to. Retiring, a lot of people have a hard time retiring because now your routine has been busted and your sense of normal has been distracted. And even sometimes good change, like outgrowing friends, success. Success, let's talk about that for a second, because people grieve success. Because once you're successful, you're gonna have to let go of a lot of things that you thought you were people you loved, people you hung out with, because it sends rifts, the way you lived your life, the decisions you make, because now you're in a different level, you've been exposed to something different. And even sometimes social and political stability, when people leave their home countries to go to another country because a war broke out, there's political instability, the economics are not working pretty good, the economy clashed, people grieve that. And even when good things happen, like having a baby, people might have planned a baby, but adjusting to having a baby in the house, the loss of sleep and dealing with all this change, the independence, you can't just get up and go anymore. You have to find a babysitter, now we gotta worry about daycare, now we gotta have to adjust and attend to this little being that does not sleep 24/7 and eats all odd hours, and we have to parent, our behaviors have to change, and we have to grow. So these are all things that we have to grieve. Now, as I mentioned, grief is a very complex emotion. It comes with a complex emotion. It's got its system. It doesn't matter what you've lost. It doesn't matter what you're going through, because your body is activated, the emotional system that's required to process the emotions of grief. Now, grief is one of the most powerful emotions that you'll ever experience in your life. That's it. That's a big one there, because there's loss. And now anytime we start talking about loss, in fact, the best example I can put is like we all own a cell phone. When we got all these apps open, it starts to drain your battery. Now, grief is that biggest app that uses the most battery energy, and it will slow down your life. It will change everything. Anytime you start to use all these apps open, your phone is going to send you that battery draining at a faster rate. You need to close down the app because this app is draining faster than that. Now, grief is one of those things that takes up a whole lot of your mental and emotional space, and it drains the energy out of you. You're not going to get over grief over, just in like 24 hours or in a month, because it's a process. Because your emotions have to process, and they don't process as fast as machines and techniques. All these technology has told us to process. It's not 5G. It's going to take as long as it takes. The average time that's been documented is about 18 to 24 months to fully process the death of somebody or the loss of something, from inception to the end, from denial to acceptance. It's a process. And mind you, this is all determined, based on, how we're processing it. If we're processing grief in a healthy way, yes, we fall into that range. And so that's what it is. So how does the human anatomy work when it comes to grief. Let's talk about that. What should you expect? How is the system supposed to work? Now, the human emotional system, it just processes emotions and releases them. Because what happens, for example, there's an external trigger. Something happens on the outside and it triggers an emotional response inside of me. And that emotional response could be joy, it could be sadness, it could be feelings of depression, it could be anger, it could be sadness. So when it erupts that, the first step is it's telling me that, sir, you're processing, the energy you're processing is coming across as sadness. That's all the human emotional system is there to inform me of how I'm processing things, to say I'm experiencing the world or the external trigger event through a process of sadness or whatever it is. So once I have that emotion, I have to bring it to my awareness. Now, there's a good point to talk about that. 90% of life, things is driven by the subconscious mind. The 90% of your life is in your subconscious and 10% is just in your conscious mind. So sometimes if we wonder why I keep on seeing the results I don't like in my life, I need to check on what's happening in my subconscious mind, because sometimes my subconscious mind keeps on releasing things that I don't know and creating environments and behaviors and results that I'm not privy to. That's why therapy works, because it allows us to sit down and look and see what's happening in there. Now, unfortunately, grief, when we lose somebody, all your emotions are lodged in there, in your subconscious. So the process of grief is from bringing them from the subconscious into the conscious mind. So when your emotion erupts in the subconscious mind, it comes into the surface. And once it comes into the surface now, I have to process that emotion. And I have to explore it as the next step, because now I'm aware of it. First step, it came from my subconscious to my conscious mind, that's awareness. The second step that I have to look at is looking at exploring the emotion. Why am I feeling this way? Why does it hurt so bad? Why am I angry? Oh, I am angry because I just lost my job. I'm worried because of the income that I've lost. And I wonder, can I get a new job, and how soon can I get a new job with 30 million people unemployed at this current moment? See, that's exploring an emotion. Now, when I explore that emotion, then I have to process and release it. So processing and releasing an emotion is one of those things that I have to intentionally either sit in it. Sometimes an emotion, you can't process it, like sadness. You just gotta let it walk through you. You just gotta sit and don't do the things that you normally do, because sometimes we eat our sadness away, we drink our sadness away, we worry our sadness away. Sometimes we yell at people our sadness away. Sometimes we distract ourselves with, some retail therapy. We go shopping. We just do all these habits. Some go to strip clubs, some go to the bar, some go all different things, even workaholics too. We let you guys off the hook a lot of time. But you know what? That is how we normally process. So sitting in an emotion is just not responding to the urges that you're getting. Just sit there, let it pass. It's working itself out of your system and it's gonna go through. And sometimes acknowledging it and processing it is just even writing a letter, understanding how you feel about it and thinking about it. That's processing an emotion. And sometimes even crying, which is a key component of grief. When you see people crying, they're processing an emotion. Just last week, I spoke to a client who was telling me that her husband was saying, "Oh, you need to stop crying. You two were crying too much," after she lost a family member. And I'm thinking to myself, the lady is processing the emotions correctly. That is a big part of grief. You have to cry. You have to let it go. You have to work through the emotions. You have to go there. Because anytime I don't process these emotions, I'm going to get stuck and I'm going to get backed up. Emotions do not go anywhere. They will stay in there and they will come out as something else. Now, when we start experiencing other things like depression, anxiety, those are just symptoms. Those are warning signs. That's your check engine light telling you that we are not processing information correctly on the inside. There's something more that we need to do. You need to take time, slow down, explore how you're feeling. Because all these are symptoms, illnesses. That's the body sending messages to you. Your body is alive and a complex system. It's consistently communicating with you and sending messages to you that you need to stop and pay attention to. That's why meditation is so much, a big component of everything, because meditation allows me to take time to understand and to feel how I feel. But a lot of us swing from tree to tree, event to event, thing to thing, and never stop to feel how we feel and how am I really doing? How am I inside? Now, COVID gave us that opportunity to really look back and see how we're feeling. And some of us don't like what we're seeing or what we're experiencing because we have backed up emotions that we haven't dealt with. As I mentioned earlier about a car, it goes on and processes. You put gas in, it goes into the car. The car, because of combustion, it burns the gas, and the gas creates energy, and the car moves better. And the gas is taken to the catalytic converter. The catalytic converter creates that, burns, kind of purifies, cleans it up, and releases, better gas out there. This is why we're going into the more electric vehicles, because we're trying to keep the environment safe and clear of all these toxic gases. But imagine if we close the exhaust system in a car and we don't allow it to do what it's supposed to do. And it's backed up with all these negative gases, i.e. they're gonna come in the cabin and they're gonna start choking the passengers. Now that thing that the car was designed to do, to carry passengers, it's not able to do anymore. It becomes an uncomfortable ride, and you can't sit in the car, you're choking. And we know carbon monoxide actually eventually kills. There are people who've killed themselves like that. So that's what we don't want to do, because when we encounter things like grief, it's a powerful emotion. We gotta always check to say, am I processing grief? Am I allowing myself to feel the way I feel? Am I allowing myself to process the emotions that are associated with it? Am I allowing myself to go through the motions and really look inside to see how I'm feeling? So that's grief. So now that we're in that stage with grief and understand how the human is supposed to work, that a human is supposed to grieve. Because we grieve because, let's say we're adjusting and we've lost someone. It solicits a number of emotions. It tells us that we loved the person. It's actually a part of a human, a human experience. Now, when someone passes, a lot of us, the first steps that we normally get into is shock. Let's talk about those steps of grief. Because there's a state of shock that happens. When my brother called me and said, Dad died, I hung up on the brother and said, check again, because I was just in a state of shock and I was in denial. And in this sense, like, how could they die? Could this be possible? Because my mind is trying to process that thing, because that level of information is too much to handle. So your body, to protect you, it puts you in a state of shock. Because if you've talked to a lot of people, they say that, you know what, I went through the whole funeral and I don't even remember much from it. Because your body is helping you, because it's saying this emotion is too huge for you to deal with. So grief is broken down into phases, and it's actually released into batches into your life, into batches that you can process and still be okay. Because let's face it, a lot of us don't like emotional work, because emotional work is exhausting, it's taxing, and it's always dealing with that pain. I remember a stage when I was like, I quit grief, I'm tired. I don't want to cry anymore, I don't want to be sad anymore. Life doesn't taste the same, it doesn't feel the same. I just don't like where I am right now. So the state of shock helps us to absorb what has happened and to be able to function and do what needs to be done in that state. So, and then when we're in shock, we also get into a little bit of some denial. Oh, that ain't so. Really? Did somebody really die? Is that true? Oh, maybe it's a bad dream. Let me go to sleep. When you wake up in the morning, hey, oh, it's real. It really happened. Somebody died. And that's it. And so sometimes that's, and slowly guilt and pain start to, sip in. They start to sink in. That's the next phase that I find people in. Because now we're starting to acknowledge slowly in our mind to say, oh man, this guy really died. And then you start to think about, what do I need to do? How did I tell them I love them? Did I say I miss you? Did they know how much they meant to me? Did they know all this, all this conversation is starting to talk, and now a little bit of emotional pain starts to set in, because now we're realizing a little bit of us is acknowledging that this is real, this is not going anywhere, this just happened, dad just died, it's real. So now when I started to walk into that space, I started to think deep. Oh, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna travel? Because mind you, my family, my parents lived in Zimbabwe and I was here in the United States. And so now I enter a different stage and a different level of conversation, because I'm thinking I need to go for the funeral. But at that point, I wasn't able to travel. So guess now I'm stuck. Now I've entered another era called complex grief, which we'll discuss later. See, because my dad was a beautiful man inside and outside. And he would be there for all of us. So the thought of not being able to attend his funeral nauseated me. I thought I was gonna die. It just put me into a whole different tailspin, because this is something I never ever thought I would do. Miss my dad's funeral. So yes, we carried forward, and I started feeling guilty about that. The funeral arrangements. I felt guilty that I wasn't there with my mother and with my siblings. I wasn't there to help my older brothers who made the funeral arrangements. Oh, that really hurts. That hurts to the core of who I am. So the guilt and pain starts to set in. And sometimes the guilt comes in based on the decisions that we've made, the time that was lost. I was talking to a client and they were really distraught because they had made a decision to send a family member to a facility, but this facility didn't take care of them well enough, and then the family member ended passing on due to an illness they contracted in that facility. So this became a very big challenge for him, because now they're having complex grief. I lost a family member, now I'm feeling guilty. Should I have or should I not have sent them over there? So that's normal to go through those emotions. So there's sadness, regret, emotional suffering. And I want to throw in something that's interesting here. There's a study that people who have taken care of family members who've had a long-term illness normally experience guilt when they die. And the guilt is not because of anything that I've mentioned, but the gift is sometimes they feel relieved that I don't have to take care of them anymore. I don't have to rush home and do all this. My life had been stressful over the past 5 years. So it's one of those things that we feel like, as a human being, am I supposed to feel like that? So there is that guilt over there that slips into, and that's a normal feeling. It's okay to feel these feelings. There are no right or wrong emotions. How I feel is how I feel. Society has lied to us and told us that there are ways that I should feel and ways that I should not feel. An emotion is an emotion. How I feel is how I feel. And it's neither right nor wrong. The only thing that's a difference is, what do I do with it? Because if I ignore how I feel, I'm not being truthful with myself. And therefore, you cannot lie to your emotional processing system. If there's anger, it's anger. It needs to be processed as anger and explore what it is. You cannot hack the system and try to put all the positive psychology on top of that. But until you really get to the root of what's causing that, you will never ever be able to get over the emotion, and it will keep on disrupting your life. So be honest with your emotions. Don't judge them. We are just here to explore them because they are here to help us heal what's happening on the inside. Okay, so anyway, moving along. Anger is another part of, the grieving process. We get angry. I was angry with God. God, you knew this was gonna happen. You knew I wasn't gonna be able to travel home. Dad died. I'm here, I'm stuck. I'm alone. Family is grieving over there. This man loved me. There's nothing he would have not done for me. And all I had to say was goodbye on the phone. Oh, that ate me up, and I was really angry. I was really, really angry. And then you start to say, God is throwing some little bit bargaining chips over here. Maybe, I need to, if you were to do this, maybe, and allow me to travel, I will come back and I will do this, I will do that and that. Oh, I need a miracle. All these things start to come through your mind because you're trying to avoid what it is, the reality of the situation, because the reality of the situation really hurts and it really bites you on the inside. So as I started looking at that anger sipped up, I started lashing out at other people. I started lashing out. I remember one time I lashed out at this coworker. I saw myself in third person, and those who know me, I'm a mild-tempered guy. I rarely get upset, because I just tell you how I feel. But this day I got out of myself and I leaned in on this woman, and I feel like I'm gonna have to call her and apologize again. But she was gracious and she was kind of at the end and said, I think you need to get some help, because I was taking out my anger on her. And so from that moment I learned, I need to go see somebody before I get fired. Now let's talk about the depression, the loneliness that comes with it. Because there is a depression when we start to realize what just has happened. Now, let me say depression is normal. It's a normal part of life because a human being is going to experience these low emotions. What we check for in psychology is how long have you been in that state? Is there a substantial trigger from the outside that has triggered this feeling of depression? Because anytime you're within the 3 to 6 months range dealing with depression, and if there's a substantial trigger like grief, or loss of a job or a divorce, well, you're processing it normal because you are sad. Depression is one of those overwhelming sadness. That's the simplest definition I can give of it. So it's a normal part of life. It's a normal part of the process of depression. And I've had discussions, where I've talked with some people who are going through the grieving process, who've lost a loved one. And they wonder, should I go on and be on an antidepressant or something? Now, there are some things that are normal, that are part of being a human being. We need to process complex and difficult emotions. It is part of being a human being because anytime we process complex and difficult emotions that have a high threshold of pain, growth is the end result. Human beings are here to grow, and processing all these things is a part of who we are. And we are equipped to process these things. Unpleasantness, because we have the mental and the emotional aptitude, and definitely the system. And we do have other people who can help us to walk through these difficult phases. So I would say, try working through things the natural and normal way. You can handle it. Seek help if it gets overwhelming. If you're depressed past through the 3 to 6 months, please consult someone, your physician, consult a counselor or anybody, because some of these things are part of life. Now, let's look at, so as we go through all this anger and, bargaining and shock and all these processes, we start to look at, as we're working through acceptance if we're processing our emotions in a healthy way. Because acceptance is that stage where I've learned to live life without the family member. I've accepted within me that they're not here. I've processed through the system the major aspects of death, of the emotions that I've been experiencing that are within me. So that's okay. Once we get to that stage, that's okay. You can deal with grief in that aspect. Now, when I process grief in a healthy way, I'm able to move on to the acceptance stage. I'm able to work through my mind and my emotions and my lifestyle and acknowledge them, and I've really not shied away from the things that I'm feeling. Then I'm processing grief in a healthy way. Which leads me into a new space, which is processing grief in a healthy versus an unhealthy way. Now, a healthy way to process grief, is to acknowledge the emotions, explore them, because at every stage we grieve something different about the person. Remember earlier I said grief is released in batches. So whenever a batch of emotion comes up, I have to look and see, what is it about today? Do I miss the fact that we would have fun? I miss the fact that, what do I miss the person? Do I miss them? Am I grieving what will never be? Am I grieving the fact that I feel like I didn't spend time with them? All those things are important. So assign every emotion that you feel with a meaning, because emotions only process when they have meaning assigned to them. Now, that's how I would process grief, and sometimes if I can't do it, I would always advise, seek a therapist, seek a counselor. We are all here, 7 billion of us, to support each other through life and through challenging things. So I would like, I would recommend that you consult somebody. Always choose to walk through life. That's why human beings are there. A licensed professional will be able to guide you through the process. So I would say, look at that. So that's how a healthy process. And when we're looking at healthy, we look like you are grieving and progressing along the way. There's progress. You're able to work through your emotions. But unhealthy ways, this is where people go do the obvious to start with: shooting up, taking drugs, drinking, strip clubs, sex, and all these, overeating, bottling down emotions, which is the most dangerous one, because anytime, think about putting air in a basketball, it's going to reach its limit and it's going to pop. Anything you push down, it's going to erupt with pressure on the up end. So think about that. All the emotions that I push down are going to come up at some point. I've dealt with some people who've told me, nah man, I don't do that. I don't deal with emotions. I don't have emotions. That's a lie. What you're telling me is I've cut my system out. I have, stopped trying to experience life and live because the pain is too much to experience. That's what people do. That's what people will say, I don't have emotions. It comes out in some other unhealthy way. That's what that is. So we are here to support each other. Talk to somebody, see a professional, because grief is serious pain. It's not something that we could play with. Now, talking about the emotion of the pain. Pain in itself is not a negative or a positive thing. Pain is part of life, You have to develop a relationship with pain, because pain is part of life. It is actually a catalyst for change. Human beings are creatures of habit, and sometimes we like to stay in a state of being. But when we stay in a state of being, we end up having issues because we don't grow, we don't change, we start getting miserable and depressed. Humans are supposed to evolve and grow. So pain is a catalyst for change because we hate discomfort. So pain is sent in our lives to disturb the comfort and move us to the next space so that we can change and grow. And the more we make peace with pain and the fact that life has got the good and the bad and they coexist together, sometimes it will be easier to process all these painful emotions. No matter what pain you process, the human has the ability to process the emotional, it has the emotional bandwidth to process whatever comes to you. Because life is kind in that it never sends in our way things that we're not able to bear. So everybody can deal with it. My greatest fear was, am I going to be able to survive if I lose my parents, if I lose a family member? I was surprised because after a while I remember I was like, I don't think I'll ever laugh again. I'll never be happier again. I threw a pretty party and I just decided to say, this is it. But I've had some happy moments. I've had some joyful moments. But in that event, I started to learn that pain is a part of life. Some of us are going to go through some horrendous, difficult things. It's not that life is against you. Sometimes it's just your cup. It's just the things that you were given to deal with. And whatever it is, it's not personal. It's just life. Because a lot of us have qualms with life. We have issues with it all the time. We think that it ought to be another way and that if it works a certain way, it's unfair, it's not kind, we've lost something. That's not entirely true. Life is just like that. Life is just what it is. It's not fair, it's just. Whatever you get, you also got something on the other side to offset that. So it's double entry. For every debit, there's a credit. Life is just what it is. You have what it takes. You can step up and you can actually win if you choose to be intentional about it. So improve the way you handle pain. Accept it as part of life. Accept that the nature of life, it's got the good and the bad. That's just what it is. Anyway, thought I could just throw that in there. Let's go on for further into this grief. Now, as we grieve, we go up and down. And we learn a lot of things, that about the whole process. We learn about people, our friends, and everything. Now, this part is for those of us who are always there helping other people. Those of us who might be empaths, HSPs, HSP, highly sensitive people. The people who are always there for other people, who run when other people are hurting, who drive there and go and be there. From the time somebody loses somebody from the hospital all the way to the graveyard, you are there. They have to chase you away from their side to say, go home and sleep. A lot of us don't have, it's not unusual to feel that we didn't get the same love and concern and comfort from our friends or family members because when people die. Because that's something that a lot of us end up feeling upset that I thought I mattered. But people don't always know how to comfort people. So expect that. Nobody can comfort you in that way that you expect them because people don't know what to do. And this is exactly why people say stupid stuff like, oh, they ain't heaven, they in a better place. Oh, if not you, who did you want, to lose them? Oh, be strong, they would want to see you sad. Okay, I'm going to step out and just say that's pure nonsense. Anybody who's just lost a family member does not need to hear that. So sometimes it's better just to be there and be quiet and take the cues from somebody. There is nothing that you can say that can make somebody feel comfortable or get over a grief because it's a process. It's something that's going to hurt. It's going to take 18 to 24 months. So if you got some magical stuff to say that's going to heal somebody and make them feel better in 5 minutes, please come teach that class. I want to be a part of that class because I need to know that, because that will be some groundbreaking stuff right there. Anyway, so moving right along. So that's one of the things that you will learn. that people don't always know how to deal with grief. It makes people uncomfortable. That's why you rarely hear people talk about this. It's an individual thing. You're gonna feel lonely, you're gonna feel alone because that person meant something to you. I have 5 siblings, including my mom. There were 7 of us grieving this man here. And this man meant something different to each one of us. So I can't make my siblings grieve like I grieve because we're all grieving some different aspect of what this parent meant to us. Or to my mom, she was grieving a friend, a husband, and a life partner. So grief is different. We cannot force people to grieve the same. That leads me to the next thing about the nature and lessons from grief is that we all grieve differently. Grief is different. So long as it's healthy, it's a healthy way you are welcome to grieve however you want to. And there's no timeline. Because when you grieve, we're just grieving in one process. To some people, they want to talk about it. Some people want to sit and be on the phone and talk about how they felt. Some, the loss is too painful to even start to articulate it. How do I even talk about this? Some are just going to be quiet and numb and still processing it and starting to deal with it, you know what I mean? So, and trying to find the right words or the right articulation to say how they're feeling, or some may not. So there's no right or wrong way to grieve so long as it's healthy. And when I say healthy, I mean so long as we're making progress in the right direction. And so don't compare how you grieved and how I grieved, because sometimes people come and say, well, you know, when I was grieving in this 6 months, I was at this space, and why are you still stuck there? Remember, relationships with the people that are being grieved mean something different. We all don't grieve things the same, even if we're grieving the same person. And it's a different experience grieving a child, you know what I mean? And grieving the loss of a parent, grieving the loss of one who just gets murdered or loses their life. That's different. There was a town hall meeting that was held in Dallas a few years ago when there was a shooting in Dallas. I think it was 2016 or 2017 when there was a shooting in Dallas, and a few police officers were killed. And that's a week that Philando Castilla, Alton Sterling, and they had lost their lives that weekend. I was part of a town hall meeting where all the key players in Dallas, the city officials, I was fortunate enough to be invited because of what I do, my gift, with therapy. I was in that room and I got to see everybody who was involved. Because when you're outside, you get to speculate things, you get to talk about things, from a speculative based on what you're hearing from the media. But when you're in the room and start to see the police officers who were standing next to their co-worker who they've known for 15 years and see them get shot in the face and have their face blown off, or I got to see Alton Spears' aunt, I got to see Trayvon Martin's parents, they were there. I got to hear, I think, Philando Castilla's girlfriend chimed in, she phoned in, and I was there. The sorrow and the pain that was in that room was amazing. It was just mind-boggling. I could sense the hurt. We were in a green room before the event started, and everybody was just quiet. It was just an eerie quietness because everybody was just processing what had happened differently. Because when you get to see things behind the scenes, our opinions shift, and we get to see the people behind these things that we just talk about, and we humanize it. We start to understand how people really are grieving, that we grieve differently. And in that moment, the only thing that could work was just to sit there and be quiet, and that's why I was there. I was just to sit there to support all these people, and I just had to be quiet and just observe and just let them know that another presence is in this room because I care. I really do care. I was created to walk with humanity, and I have so much love for humanity that Whenever any human being hurts, I hurt, my heart grieves. And when I see how nasty we are to each other, at times it bothers me. It really, really bothers me. And this is across all walks of life. I'm just here for the human race to support everybody. But anyway, what I learned from that was to look at, the loss. We get over, we start to live, we learn to live with the pain of losing the loved one. But we just learn to live with the pain. We don't get over it. It's still deep down lodged inside of us. It's still hurting. It still hurts so much. So it's a part of existence here. And there is no other way to process grief other than just to walk through it. That's what we need to do. There is no other way to process grief than to walk through it. Anytime there's a painful emotional experience, we just have to walk through it. You can't go sideways, there's no shortcut, there's no anything. And when we avoid dealing with it, we just prolonging the inevitable, because the inevitable is going to happen anyway. We're going to deal with the pain of the loss somehow. I'm going to be depressed for a long time. I'm going to be angry for a long time. I'm going to develop anxiety. My sleep is going to be disturbed. So somehow I might as well just decide to say I'm going to walk through this pain. It's normal to feel loss. It's normal to experience emotional pain. It's not a sign of emotional strength or whatever to avoid confronting your emotions. That's actually a weakness. Because when you close the part of you that feels pain, you close off your heart and then you stop experiencing life. And we don't want to do that. Because when you shut your heart, you don't only shut out the good things, the bad things, you also shut out the good things. So you have to stay open and develop the muscles to be able to walk through painful emotions. And whatever it is, remember again, you have the strength to walk through it. And it hurts. Grief, the worst loss is the one that you're currently experiencing. So sometimes people make it sound as if, well, you need to feel this way. Grandma, this and that, when this, you didn't cry like that. No. Every loss is different. The one that I'm experiencing right now, it's worse. It's difficult. I want to talk about another form of loss and grief that's not talked about. To the women that have had miscarriages and the ones that have lost babies, the ones I dare to say that have even had a choice to terminate pregnancies, had to choose to do that for various reasons. There is a loss and a grief that's talked about. That's not talked about. Because we usually assign grief to people who have lost loved ones that have been here and lived a few years outside. What about those that have had miscarriages, that have stillbirth, that had babies who just survived a few seconds? These people are grieving. But unfortunately, sometimes we make them feel less than because, well, the baby, you didn't get to bond with the baby, didn't get to see the baby, didn't get to do all this. Well, it was just, you lost in the first term, it was a miscarriage in the first term and all that. But that's still a loss, because a loss, remember, is qualified by three things. What is? I grieve what is because I had come accustomed to the idea that I now have a life in me. I'm going to have a baby. I'm going to change. The things have changed and people are excited. And then now, all of a sudden, the baby has passed on. There's been a miscarriage. Now we lose what is. We have to adjust to a new normal. We start the grieving process. So now the grieving process has started. And that becomes an issue. And then now the part is what will never be. We got a child. But anything that leaves a mark on a human being and that takes them on a different journey, is worth grieving. And I apologize to all the women that we as a world have minimized your pain and the suffering, and the people who secretly who secretly cry at night and mourn over the children they've lost, the miscarriages that have happened, the stillbirth, or even the pregnancies that had to be ended and terminated. When you're quiet by yourself, I just want to say we hear you, I see you. And that pain there, it's not fair to keep that pain to yourself. You don't deserve to torture yourself. But we do know that you are grieving and you are hurting, and I do recommend you talk to somebody, because as therapists, we're always here to listen. And we need to walk you through that place to be able to walk through the grief of the loss of a loved one. And I will say this lastly on this topic of things about grief, the nature of grief. Nobody can do it alone. We are here to walk together as human beings. Nobody can process grief alone. It's part of why we are here, 7 billion of us. We need each other. We need to support each other. If you're around people who cannot support you or who do not know how to support you, and as I said earlier, don't be mad at them. They're just giving you what they know to do. Grief is not a topic that's discussed frequently, and that's not apparent all the time. So let's not hold them accountable. Let's not be nasty to them. Let's not hate them, but that's it. Let's take time to seek other people who are professionals, who are qualified to walk through this with us. And also remember, our family members, they're also grieving. So our support system is kind of shaken up. So I would say develop a support system. Find people who can allow you to listen, who can allow you to talk, where you can be emotionally vulnerable and feel safe in front of them. So that's part of the grieving process. You have to have a healthy supporting system. A system that allows you to go through what you're going through and support you as needed. And also sometimes we gotta ask for what we need when we're grieving. I need to be left alone. I need to sit down. I need to go out. I need you to just come and sit and be quiet and watch this TV show with me. Come on, let's go eat. We're not gonna talk and all that. And always remember, there's nothing that anybody can say that can make somebody get over grief within 24 hours or within 5 minutes, and I'm still waiting. If you can do that, you come on. I'm waiting. I want to see that. I want to learn about that. Now, let's looking at grief. I've talked about all the difficult stuff from grief that we need to get, that we deal with, and how it's a process. But whilst you're going through this process, what's also happening if you're processing it in a healthy way? A metamorphosis is happening. You are changing from the inside out. Because as much as you're grieving the person who's gone away, you're grieving the version of yourself that existed whilst that person was around here. Because when a parent dies, kids have to grow up. I think I finally grew up when my dad passed away, because I had to step up and let's take over some of his responsibilities. And I had to realize that overnight, I am on my own. I have to step up now and be a man. Dad is not here to solve some of the problems, and my siblings, my younger siblings, are looking up to me to solve some things because of the role that I play in my family, because we all got different roles that we play. So I had to step up. And I started to see that it has some hidden benefits. But we don't start to experience these benefits until we're over the acceptance stage. Because I started to see that I had some mental and emotional growth. My threshold to deal with pain had expanded. And I had understood, I started to realize that the worst thing that I feared had happened to me. And I was still standing. And genuinely, I was alive and well, and I had my mind right. So that was something that I learned, that emotional and mental growth that came, that's associated with that. And even it gave me an opportunity to redefine my life. What is life going to look like going forward? Because what happens with death, it makes life real. You get real, life gets real. You start to see the real angle, the tough edge that life has. And one thing about life that you start to realize that it's got a punch and uppercut that hurts so bad that if you get socked right in the face, you will fall on your feet. But when you're able to dust off and get up and keep walking, that changes. That changes you as a person. And emotionally, I was a person who just battled fear. I don't know why. I had a lot of fear inside of me. Fear to believe who I was. Fear to walk as who I was. I just shut myself down. But after fighting that, as I was processing all those emotions, the fear kind of left as well. And that's the moment that I realized that fear, death also brings all these emotions that you've been harboring and pushing down to the surface. Because remember, it requires energy to push down and hold a house of cards that controls your emotional being. If you don't want to process them, it's a house of cards because it's going to collapse anyway, sooner or later. It takes a amount of energy, but imagine what grief takes that energy from there. So the house of cards falls apart and all the energy you've been exerting to hold the house of cards and the facade, lets loose and everything comes to the surface. And then you get to learn about, you get to opportunities to resolve things. So use grief. Whilst I'm in deep pain, why can I not just be in pain about everything and just get it over with? Because all the pain that we harbor inside, it has an expiration date. If you deal with it and confront it in a healthy way, you will actually get over it. And death gives you a realistic perspective of life. You start to see life when it's real. You put away all the childish things and you start to think like a grown man or a grown woman. And you start to look at life for what it is. And you start to get serious. What really happens is you start to feel vulnerable. And a vulnerability because I get in touch with my mortality. Now, when I get in touch with my mortality and know that I am here and death can come in my house and take what it wants, because I find it, like I said earlier, rude to just step in and say, we're taking this, deal with it, that's it. When you get hit with that vulnerable feeling, you start to take life seriously and you start to focus on the things that really matter because these are really important things. I started to look at myself seriously. I started to think about where I was going with my life. And 2 years later, that's when I opened Inside Fitness because I wasn't playing. I knew that my time here was limited and I had to do what I had to do. But the main reason is the pain that I felt whilst I was losing my dad. I just thought about how many people are out there that are going through this. And I decided to say, you know what, we're gonna open a place where we're gonna walk with hurting people. If it means we just sit there and eat chicken wings, yeah, we're gonna do it. And it started from 2015 and I was alone as one therapist. And then years later, there's 9 of us that work there. And in a month, we have 400 sessions that are completed there. And we were deemed in 2018 the fastest growing practice in Frisco, Texas. So the reason why I share that is because that's the benefits that came from grief. Because I didn't want to work with people like that. I didn't want anybody to experience what I was experiencing. Because death leaves a mark on you, makes things, real. Now, another lesson too from there is we developed an understanding. As I started earlier when I opened, I said, life is a series of death and rebirth. Death is a part of life, and everything is modeled like that. So the sooner I allow myself to experience death and grief, and to acknowledge it as part of life, then the easier living will be. A lot of us live in fear of our emotions or experiencing emotional pain or losing loved ones. That fear captures us and it stops us from living. The real perspective ought to be, I need to enjoy my loved ones because we have a limited time together here. I started to think about what is it, in fact, let me preface by this. When I was 15, I used to like to read the Proverbs. I'm fascinated by the human mind and how the human sees things and the human thinks and processes life. There was a proverb that says, it's better to go to a house of mourning than that of joy and cheer, for death sharpens your understanding. And I was like, who would want to go and do that? That bothered me. Yes, I was a 15-year-old reading that. I was a little bit of a nerd. This didn't just start here. It's been around for a very long time. Life fascinates me. Human behavior fascinates me through life. But when I read that proverb, I understand it now. Because my game and my thought process was elevated as I was going through grief. All the clients that I've worked with that have gone through grief, lost loved ones, children, husbands, nephews, nieces, siblings, whatever it is, parents, they always come out with a different perspective of life. And some of them find the courage to pursue their dreams and purpose, and they go on and start to live life. We need to normalize death, and it's a part of life. The grieving process is part of life. This is just what it is. The sooner we accept the process and understand what's going on. A lot of us struggle with these emotions because we have never been taught how to manage them, and we've never been told that it's a part of life. Because death and rebirth, that's what life is modeled around. That's just the nature of life. If you look at life outside right now, the seasons are changing. We call it fall, we're excited about the trees yellowing and all that. No, they're just telling us what we know. Even if we look at the animal kingdom, this is what's happening. The most successful human beings are the ones that take time to still get in touch with their inside and take time to see what's happening emotionally and mentally. Because grieving and emotional pain and loss are just a part of life, how we live. So I encourage you today to just start thinking about the things that I've talked about, the nature of grief. And as I was talking and recording this, I've been thinking that maybe I need to create a series out of this. Because right now, today, I just talked about what is grief, why we grieve, the nature of grief, the lessons that we learn from grief, and the things that we see from grief. But I want to go back further and maybe come back next time and talk about death and really talk about what is death and what's the correct perspective of death. Because a lot of my friends have lost loved ones, have lost children, and we've lost friends to tragic, unfortunate circumstances, sometimes just illness, sometimes age. And I said, you know what, the things that have been revealed to me, I need to keep on sharing with people past the walls of this office, because I understand there's a lot of people internationally who cannot make it to Inside Fitness. But thank God for technology, we could walk together. So I'm going to come back and do a next installment on death. What is the correct perspective of death? How do we need to look at it? Because in itself, it's a part of life. And what is life in relation to these things? Because those are the questions that make us grieve. But anyway, for today, we'll leave it here. I hope you found this information useful, and thank you for joining. Once again, I'm Honor Sithole, the founder and CEO of Inside Fitness 360. We're a counseling and life coaching agency out here in Frisco, Texas. And please visit us on our website, www.insidefitness360, if you want to schedule an appointment, or if you just want to find out more information about our practice, what we do, where to find us, and how to get in touch with you. I am really, would be honored to hear if this helped you. If any of this, you found this information useful, and if you want to engage further in conversation with you. Well, I'll talk to you soon in the next installment.